The Undertaker, a name synonymous with fearlessness and the supernatural, had always been the WWE's enigma, a towering figure cloaked in shadows, silence, and myth, a man who outlived eras, who never blinked under pressure, never cracked under pain, and certainly never cried under the bright lights of the arena. But all that changed when the world lost Hulk Hogan. For the first time, fans didn't witness a dead man. They saw a human being stripped bare, grieving not as a character, but as a man who had just lost a piece of himself. The death of Hulk Hogan wasn't just the loss of a wrestling icon. It was the collapse of a pillar that held up the very world professional wrestling had been built upon. Hogan's passing at 71 from sudden cardiac arrest sent a shockwave not only through fans, but through the very souls of those who stood beside him in the trenches, and no soul felt it more profoundly than Mark Calloway. That day, somewhere in the wide, golden plains of Texas, the Undertaker sat alone at his ranch, soaking in the quiet of retirement, the kind of peaceful isolation he had grown to appreciate after decades living in the chaos of arenas, flights, hotels, and scripted battles. The moment his phone buzzed and the trembling voice on the other end said, "He's gone, it's Terry," it was as if the world stopped. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just sat, frozen. His hand dropped slowly, his eyes fixed on the sky, trying to absorb a truth too heavy for even a giant to carry. For someone like Calloway, who had buried dozens of peers over the years, from Yokozuna to Paul Bearer to Brody Lee, death wasn't new. But this one pierced deeper. This was different, because Hogan wasn't just a colleague or even a friend. He was the mold, the spark, the blueprint for everything that came after. And for The Undertaker, he was the man who had indirectly ushered in his rise, who had laid the foundation that would allow someone like him to become more than just a gimmick. He became a legend. Michelle McCool, his wife and confidant, found him seated silently on the edge of their porch that evening. His massive frame hunched forward, elbows resting on shaking knees, hands knotted together like a man trying to keep himself from falling apart. The tears ran down without sound. No sobbing, no moaning, just raw, unfiltered emotion that spilled out of him like water from a cracked dam. It had been years, she would say later, since she'd seen him look that lost. This wasn't the stoic protector. This wasn't the indestructible phenom. This was just Mark, the man, grieving a ghost from his past. The weight of their history together added layers to his pain. It was easy for outsiders to remember only the controversies, the supposed heat, the backstage tension, the infamous Survivor Series match. But few knew the real story, the buried conversations, the quiet moments of mutual respect, the phone calls, the private nods of support exchanged backstage away from cameras and scripts. Calloway remembered vividly his first real moment with Hogan in 1991. That was the day he defeated the Immortal One to capture his first WWF championship. It should have been the greatest night of his life, but it was clouded by uncertainty and pressure. Yet when Hogan walked into the locker room after the match, he didn't give him shade. He didn't complain. He looked him in the eye, clapped him on the back, and said, "Let's see if you can carry it now, big man." That wasn't an insult. That was the ultimate compliment. It was Hogan's way of saying, "You belong." Years later, when Hogan's body began to break down and he found himself backstage more than in the spotlight, the bond between the two men deepened. No longer competitors, they became historians, sharing war stories, speaking of injuries they hid, losses they regretted, friends they buried, and matches that haunted them. At WrestleMania 30, the two shared a private moment that one WWE staffer would later describe as one of the most emotional conversations they'd ever witnessed. They spoke for hours, not as performers, but as brothers reflecting on the mountain they both climbed. So when Hogan died, Mark Calloway didn't call a press conference. He didn't demand a tribute segment. He simply picked up his phone, turned on the front camera, and recorded something that no one had seen before, a broken man sitting in his home gym, surrounded by echoes of his career, trying to say goodbye. The video lasted less than 2 minutes, but its impact was immeasurable. He wasn't wearing his gloves. He wasn't in character. He wasn't hiding behind mystique. He was simply Mark. His voice trembled. His hands fidgeted. His eyes glistened. "I don't usually do this," he said, barely holding it together. "But today, the world lost a legend. And I lost a friend." The pause that followed was heavy. Hulk Hogan was more than the leg drop. More than the shirt ripping. He was the guy who opened the door. For me. For all of us. Then he looked down, blinked hard, and added with a crack in his voice, "I didn't think it'd hit me this hard." But it did. Because even when they weren't speaking, even when years passed without a call, there was comfort in knowing that somewhere out there, Hulk Hogan was still walking the earth, still larger than life. Now, that larger-than-life light had gone out. The response was overwhelming. Superstars across generations reached out. Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes, and countless others sent messages. Many said nothing more than, "Thank you." Some just checked on him. But for one moment, The Undertaker had become the heart of WWE. And then came the tribute show. Titled, Immortal Forever, it was a celebration of everything Hulk Hogan was, from the Muscle Beach days to WrestleMania showdowns, from the NWO Revolution to his red and yellow return. But it was the closing segment, led by Calloway himself, that left everyone breathless. He stood alone in the ring beneath a single spotlight, surrounded by darkness. No music, no smoke, no theatrics, just a man in black holding the weight of decades in his heart. "Tonight," he said softly, "we don't mourn just the man. We honor the myth." He spoke with reverence, but not idolization. Hogan wasn't perfect. None of us are. But what he gave to this ring, what he gave to us, that's eternal. Then, gently, he placed a red bandana, the kind Hogan had worn for most of his career, in the middle of the ring. He didn't look back as he walked up the ramp. He didn't need to. The image was already iconic. In the weeks that followed, Mark withdrew again. Not out of pain, but reflection. He returned to Augusta, Georgia, visiting the gym where young Terry Bollea had once trained, sitting alone in the shadows, absorbing the energy of the place like a pilgrim in mourning. Then he went to the grave, a private moment no cameras captured. There, instead of flowers or gear, he left a single black glove. The same glove that had defined his character for over 30 years. When asked why, he said, "Because he always had my back. Now I've got his." The moment went viral in whispers. It was the kind of tribute no show could script, no video could capture. It was real. In the months that followed, Mark returned occasionally, to speak at fundraisers, to lend his voice to a Hogan documentary, to support young wrestlers, but never with the same fire. Michelle noted he'd started journaling daily, almost like he was writing letters to Terry, reliving their shared past. "He's talking to Hogan in those pages," she said. "And I think it's helping him heal. But healing is never linear. Some nights, he would pause old matches on the WWE network and just stare. At Hogan's eyes, at the way he moved, at the myth made flesh. And as WrestleMania season rolled around again, fans speculated. Would The Undertaker return for a final tribute? Would he walk the ramp one more time? But insiders knew the answer. "I've given everything I have to that ring," Mark reportedly said. "Now I give my memories to the ones who need them most." Because that's what Hogan's death taught him. That immortality wasn't about streaks or titles or pyro. It was about legacy carried forward, through the fans, through the brothers in arms, and through the memories etched into history by men like Mark Calloway. The dead man no longer walks with the darkness. He walks with memory, with love, with the quiet dignity of a man who once ruled shadows, now lighting a path for those behind him. Because when legends fall, they don't vanish. They echo, and The Undertaker will make sure that Hogan's echo never fades. One tear, one tribute, one heartbeat at a time. In the weeks that followed, Mark remained quiet. He turned down interview requests. Ignored even Vince's calls. He wasn't angry. He was simply hollow. Michelle revealed he'd taken up journaling again, writing long entries every day as if speaking to Hogan through paper, reliving old road stories, hashing out the emotional knots, keeping his brother alive through ink and memory. But then something inside him shifted. A need emerged, not just to grieve but to honor authentically. He pitched a new idea to WWE, not a glossy video tribute, but something raw and sacred, wrestling immortals, remembering Hogan. One wrestler, one chair, one memory at a time. And Mark sat first. In front of a black backdrop, he shared a quiet moment. "The first time I realized who Hulk really wasn't in the ring. It was backstage. I'd just beaten him for the title. He walked in, slapped me on the back and said, 'Welcome to the top, big man. Now let's see if you can carry it.' That wasn't praise. That was a challenge. That was Hogan." His voice, heavy with weight, cracked again. "He lasted. Longer than most. Bigger than all of us. Even me." Others followed. Cena, Austin, Orton, Rhodes, but no tribute cut deeper than Taker's. Because for him, Hogan wasn't just an idol. He was the reason he kept going. He recounted how, in 2003, Hogan called him out of nowhere just to say, "Brother, don't quit. You're not done." That call may have saved his career. Maybe even his life. Later, Mark made a quiet pilgrimage to Hogan's childhood gym and final resting place. At the grave, he laid something no one expected, a single black glove. When asked why, he said, "Because he always had my back. Now I've got his." The image of that lone glove sent shivers across the wrestling community. Because only those who knew the story understood what it meant. That wasn't just a tribute. That was loyalty. That was legacy. That was love. Time passed, but grief lingered. Calloway returned to the public eye slowly, only for charity or Hogan-related causes. He wasn't avoiding the spotlight. He was living inside memory. Sometimes he'd rewatch old matches, not to analyze technique, but just to remember. At airports, fans noted he smiled more, hugged longer, spoke softer. Hogan's death had peeled away the final layer of armor. "He carries the pain like a man who's earned it," Batista once said. WrestleMania season came with whispers, would he return one last time? But those close to him say he'd already made peace with the final bell. "I gave everything in that ring," Calloway told one friend. "Now I give the memories." And maybe that's the lesson in all of this, that when the immortals fall, it's not the fire that dies, but the torch that changes hands. Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, carries that torch now, not with thunder or spectacle, but with quiet devotion, one tear, one tribute, one memory at a time. Because in wrestling, legacy never dies. It echoes forever.